Wow, that's the only word that can describe what the Montreal Canadiens have been through over the last week, where they came from behind from a 3-1 deficit in their series with the Toronto Maple Leafs to win game number 7 by a score of 3-1 to ultimately complete the comeback over the Toronto Maple Leafs. This isn't a surprise to a lot of people that know what the Montreal Canadiens have been through this year, especially with what we've seen from Carey Price so far in this series, where he was fantastic for the Montreal Canadiens, and what he brought to the table really gave the Habs confidence in moving forward onto the next round with a date with the Winnipeg Jets. There's a lot of factors that will come into play with who will ultimately win this series between the Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens, but the first thing that comes to mind when you think of this series is that you're going to see elite goaltending from both sides in Carey Price and Connor Hellebuyck, both of whom were fantastic in their Round 1 series. Carey Price posted a .932 save percentage against the high-scoring Toronto Maple Leafs, while Connor Hellebuyck shut down McDavid and Draisaitl and posted an insane .950 save percentage in his Round 1 victory. Both of these two goalies are going to be up for the task in this series, and whichever one plays above the other's head should be the X factor in this series about who will advance into the semifinals in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, there's a lot of factors that will come into play for the Montreal Canadiens in order for them to win this series against the Winnipeg Jets. The first thing that comes to mind is obviously Carey Price, like we mentioned, but then you have to consider the Montreal Canadiens' big four on defense, which was managed to a T in Games 6 and 7 by Dominic Ducharme, who I have been quite critical of, but I thought he managed the bench in game number 7 very well, specifically having two centers on the ice for most draws against the big line of Matthews and Mitch Marner, which was ultimately a disappointment in that series, but Ducharme managed the bench very well in Games 6 and 7, and we really saw the kids come alive in this series for the Habs. Montreal is going to need to continue to see the effort they saw from their big four on defense in Shea Weber and Ben Sherrod, who were fantastic in Games 6 and 7 versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. They really limited Marner and Matthews' chances up front and did a really good job containing them, especially with their stick work. I thought their stick work was phenomenal in Games 5, 6, and 7, and it was really a big difference maker for the Habs in that series, and will once again be a big factor against a Winnipeg Jets team that is very deep and big up front. With that being said, the Canadiens will still have to find a way to get their bottom pairing more involved. I thought they were managed a little bit better in game number 7, but if you're going to continue to have Erik Gustafsson and Brett Kulak in the lineup, they're going to have to see more ice time moving forward, because the minutes for the big four just aren't sustainable in a big series, especially when you're playing a much bigger opponent like the Winnipeg Jets. Now, looking up front for the Canadiens, it'll be interesting to see which matchup Phillip Danault and his line get ahead of this series versus the Winnipeg Jets. You can really make the case it could be the Mark Scheifele line or the second line if that does contain Pierre-Luc Dubois. This is going to be a very interesting series in terms of star power, because the Winnipeg Jets are much deeper than the Toronto Maple Leafs are up front, so the Habs will have to manage their bench a lot better in this series, especially when they're on the road in Winnipeg. Now, there's really two X-factor forwards for me for the Montreal Canadiens in this series, and that's going to come down to Cole Caulfield and Josh Anderson. When you look at Anderson versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, you can tell that he was a big threat in game number 1, where he essentially took over that game and led the Habs to victory, but he slowed down after that, and you can tell he's playing hurt. There's something wrong with his lower body in this series. You don't have to speculate to know that much. You can tell just by the way he isn't as effective in his skating right now, and he's really not using his body as much. You can tell he's not exactly 100% right now, but then again, who is at this time of year? When you look at Cole Caulfield for the Montreal Canadiens, he wasn't exactly in the lineup very much versus the Winnipeg Jets this year, and I really think that could prove to be a big factor for the Habs in this series. They need to continue to get him in on the power play, because he's very effective on that unit for the Habs, and it showed in game number 7, where the Habs once again scored a power play goal against the Leafs. Caulfield is a big difference maker on the ice. He continues to be very elusive for this Habs team, and the goals are going to start to come. It's only a matter of time. It really depends on if he's able to find ways to beat Connor Hellebuyck in net for the Jets, but Cole Caulfield has the chance to be a big X factor in this series for the Habs. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, leave your comments down below. Let me know how you're feeling, Habs fans, after they defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games and completed that comeback. And let me know what your thoughts are versus the Winnipeg Jets and what you think will transpire in this series. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.